There are 50 US states and plenty of other territories and even other countries you could possibly live in. But being able to pick just one state to live in can be quite a daunting task. Luckily, today in this video, I put together 5 of the best US states for financial independence. And there's many reasons why these states will align really perfectly with financial independence goals. Because these states that I chose are going to be based on both objective parameters and one subjective parameter. So the objective parameters basically means it's based on the numbers. So based on the numbers, these 5 states are going to be great for financial independence because they are low in taxes and they are low in the cost of living. Whereas the subjective parameter that I chose based on my subjectiveness is that I wanted to pick a state that has, very mild winters or relatively mild winters. Okay, so extreme amounts of snow is not good for me. And that's why this is a subjective measure, because subjective is different to different people. You might be someone who loves the snow, who loves winters, maybe loves skiing and snowboarding for many months out of the year, whatever it may be. So this subjective measure might not be right for you, but just for me to add in one of my subjective measures to try to choose the best 5 states, that is what I chose. I chose to have mild winters. And in order to meet the requirements to make on this list, so the state has to be at least within the bottom half of taxes, of total tax burden, not just income taxes, not just sales taxes, not just property taxes, but of total tax burden on per citizen. It has to be in the lower half, so the lower 25, and in order to make it for the cost of living, it also has to be in the lower half, so the bottom 25 of states, the cheapest states. But when it comes to the climate, it has to be in the top half of a more mild climate. Okay, so that means it's going to have more mild winters, less cold. So for example, a state of Alaska, even though they do have the lowest tax burden, they don't make this list because they have a relatively high cost of living compared to many other states. And also they have some pretty extreme winters. So subjectively and objectively, Alaska, for example, cannot make this list. And I've actually made a video previously, something very similar to this. But in that video, I did not include the subjective parameter. I only included taxes and cost of living. And what you're going to find in this video is that many of the states, actually 3 of them, 3 out of 5, are the exact same as what I made in that other video. So that might be good news, might strengthen your reasoning for wanting to move to one of these first 3 states that I list. But also you're going to see 2 that have dropped off from that previous list if you've watched that previous video, and 2 that have now gained onto this list. Basically because they have, mild climate, they have mild winters, compared to those other 2 states that were just low taxes and just low cost of living. And just in case, just a recap on that previous video I made based on only cost of living and taxes, the top 5 states that I had were in this order. So number 1 was Tennessee, number 2 was Wyoming, number 3 was Oklahoma, number 4 was Alabama, and number 5 was South Carolina. Okay, so like I said, you're going to see 3 of those states on this list today, and 2 of them are going to drop off because of their very cold climate. And luckily, number 1 today in this state is still the state of Tennessee, because Tennessee has a tax burden of only 6.18%, so that is total combined amount of taxes. It is a very, very low tax state. It has a cost of living of 88.7, and that is an average scale of 100 across the United States, means the average cost to live in the United States. Some states are well above 100, some states are below 100, and Tennessee happens to be one of those that are below 100 at only 88.7. And when it comes to a mild climate, and more specifically, extreme winters, Tennessee ranked number 36. Now, when we're talking about mild winters, number 50 is going to be the best. And on the list, on the reference that I have for this, Hawaii ranked number 50 as having the most mild winters and pretty stable climate. And so keep that in mind when I list number 36. The higher you get towards 50, the better in terms of having a mild climate, and that is the subjective parameter. Number 2 on our list is another one that is from the previous list, and that is the state of Oklahoma. So Oklahoma has a pretty relatively very low tax as well, at 6.94% of a total tax burden. It has a cost of living of 87, so it is actually a little bit less than Tennessee. But also, for when it comes to winters, it is number 33 on the list. So according to that list, it has a slightly more colder climate or slightly more extreme winters than it does of Tennessee. But it's still ranked only number 2. And at the end of this, I'll give you my reasoning for how I rank these states exactly from 1 through 5. Because 1 is supposed to be pretty much the best, and 5 is supposed to be the least best, but they're still all very, very good states to live in, according to these objective and subjective parameters. Number 3 on our list is the other state that was from the last list, and that is the state of Alabama. Alabama has a total tax burden of 7.36%, so you'll notice they went from in the 6s and to the 7s now with Alabama. But also they have a cost of living of 89.3, which is so far the highest of the 3 states, but still well below the national average of 100. And in Alabama, they ranked number 41 for the cold climate and for the winter. So remember, number 50 is the best. So number 41, Alabama apparently has the best year-round weather, or at least when it comes to a very cold climate, not having extreme winters. And number 4 and 5 on our list are going to be new and different compared to the last list that I made. But before we move on to that, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this video so far, please make sure that you like it and give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out, and I really do appreciate it. While at the same time, consider subscribing to the channel and hit that bell for notifications, because every single week I'm putting out new videos on personal finance, on financial independence, and I just know that there's something that I can help you with. Currently, I'm putting out new videos every Tuesdays and Fridays at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So make sure you're subscribed and you have that bell on, because I don't want you to miss those videos. Now let's move on to number 4. And state number 4 is the state of Georgia. So Georgia actually has a tax burden of 7.98% total tax burden, so still relatively low in the 7s. And its cost of living on average is 89.2. Okay, so that is very, very low also compared to the national average. And just remember that some states, this is on a statewide level, that different cities, like say Atlanta, probably has a cost of living that is much higher than 89.2 compared to the rest of the state. So it's important to note that we are only talking about statewide averages, not city averages or main city averages within those states. And then when it comes to really cold winters, Georgia ranks in at number 42. Remember, number 50 was the best. So far on this list, Georgia has the best climate when it comes to not having really cold winters at number 42. Last but certainly not least, we have number 5, and state number 5 is the state of New Mexico. So kind of surprising, New Mexico has a total tax burden of 8.74%. So obviously New Mexico has the highest amount of tax burden of all the states on this list at 8.74%, but it is still very low compared to many, many other states. And when it comes to the cost of living, New Mexico has a cost of living index of 87.5. So I believe that is the numbers 2 of all the states on this list, right behind the state of Oklahoma. So right behind the state of Oklahoma, New Mexico is the lowest cost of living state on this particular list. And then when it comes to their winters, this is probably where it shines the most, because in New Mexico they rank number 45 on the list of 50 of having very mild winters. So now I want to move on to how I actually rank those states. And in order to show you in full detail what I did and how I selected this list, I need to put up a screenshot really quick for you. Okay, so as you can see on this list, it is a bit of a mess, but the way I organized it by taxes, cost of living, and mild winters. Okay, so I list the top 25, vary the lowest amount of taxes from 1 through 25, the same thing with cost of living, and then I listed from 50 to 25 the mild winters. And I will link my sources on how I found these numbers. So the top 25, you can see they're compared, and then only the 3 states that are going to be listed in all 3 of those parameters are going to be included in the list. So you can see that there is actually 9 out of the 25 states that fit the criteria of low taxes, low cost of living, and mild winters. But obviously this list is only for the top 5, and those top 5 was Tennessee, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, and New Mexico. Okay, right after them we had Missouri, Texas, South Carolina, and North Carolina. They didn't quite make the cut. So the way that I gave them the combined score was that I added up the taxes. So for example, with Tennessee, you can see Tennessee is number 3 in taxes, Tennessee is number 6 in cost of living, and Tennessee is number 15 in mild winters. And so I added those up. So 15 for mild winters plus 6 for cost of living plus 3 for taxes gives it a combined score of 24. And I did that with all 9 of the different states, and then I arranged them in order from lowest combined score to highest combined score. So the lowest combined score is technically the best when it comes to these parameters, both objective and subjective. So that is how I came to the conclusion to have this list of 5, but there are some very important things that you do still need to take in consideration if you are trying to choose what state is going to be the best for you when you become financially independent, or even while you're still on the path to financial independence. So first off, there are some other objective parameters that you should probably keep in mind that are probably a pretty big deal when it comes to choosing where to live. So crime statistics, that is a objective parameter. You can see the number of crimes committed, the number of violent crimes committed, whatever it may be. You can see crime statistics for each state. But It doesn't really matter too much on a whole state level what the crime statistics are. This is more of a local issue. So when you're choosing on where you're going to live, don't look at crime on the entire statewide level. Try to look at crime at a more local level of where you're actually going to be living, because that is definitely way more important than on a statewide level, because there could be, one or two cities within that state that are kind of bringing the crime level up compared to the entire state, and just makes the entire state look dangerous. But there could be some very, very safe areas all over the state rather than those, select few areas of high crime areas. Now, another one is the school systems. So this is again another one you want to look at a local level and not a state level. Okay, everyone wants good schools if they are going to have children that are going to be attending those schools. But again, it doesn't matter too much on a statewide level how good those school systems are. It matters more on a local level where you're actually going to be living. Another third objective parameter is the population or the size of the state. And again, I think this is more important on a local level than at a state level. You can go to the most populated state, say California, which has the most amount of people, but you can definitely find so many different rural areas with very, very little people. So it's more important on a local and not statewide level, but maybe population is something that's important to you. You might, like I said before, you might like the winters. You might like more extreme winters, so you can do, winter sports and things like that. I happen to not like extreme winters, and so that is why that was one of my subjective parameters, but that might not fit very well with you. So here are some other subjective parameters that are usually very important for most people and that you should definitely keep in mind. So employment. Maybe you're going to still want to be employed when you move to this new place, especially if you're still on the path to financial independence. So having a good, employment opportunities within the area where you're going to be located at could be very important. This is also very important if you are going to pursue something like barista fire, where basically you work part-time, mainly for the benefits and for some little extra pay, but you're still, on your FIRE journey, you're still considered financially independent. This is one thing that you do need to consider. Employment is pretty important. Another one, when it comes to subjective parameter, is the proximity to your friends and family. So you may not want to move, across the entire United States and make it very difficult for you to see your friends and family. Of course, I hope that you do make more friends in the new area that you're going to live in, but your family, you can't really change those, right? So maybe being within a relatively close distance to your family is important to you. So maybe if you want to be close enough to where you can make the drive in one day if you need to, or maybe you just want to live near an airport so you can fly and see your family very easily that way. So proximity to friends and family is some very important consideration for most people when they're trying to decide where they want to live. And the third and final subjective parameter that might be important to you is the overall culture of the place of where you're going to be moving to. There could be some different kinds of things that you might want to look out for in that regard that might be important to you. It might not. I don't know. That's why it is a subjective parameter.